Good evening to everyone listening into our first market report for the new season. And then, as always, we will also give Gert Jordan a chance to give us some feedback on what happened on the livestock side during the week. And then, last but not least, Isak Staats will be in conversation with BKB's new managing director, with Johan Stumpf. And at the end, we will listen to Isak's conversation with Johan. But with that being said, let's have a look what happened on the first wool sale for the new season. Catalog 1 were concluded today with about 8,100 bales that were on offer. 52% of those wool consisted of a medium length, 40 to 59 millimeters, and 71% of the wool were in the 20 micron and finer bracket. About 11% of the total sale were withdrawn before the auction, and of the total amount of wool that were offered, that were up for sale, 90% were sold with a passed-in rate and a no bid of only 4%. The early market indicators show that the South African market were down by 5%. And if we compare the Australian market for the same time period, they were down by about 8%. If we compare the price achieved for the first auction of the previous season, the clean price yield we were trading at 147 rand and 70 cents. We are currently trading at 140 rand 31 cents. That leaves us with a price difference of 5% that we are trading lower than on a year-to-year basis. If we look at the major currencies that play a part in the wool trading, we will see that the rand traded 2.5% weaker against the US dollar, 5.2% weaker against the Australian dollar, and then by quite a big margin of 6.4% weaker against the British pound. At this stage, the exchange rate didn't play that big a role. Quite a lot of wool on the Australian side that were not sold during the previous season were put back into the market during the season this week. And that mainly contributed to the of 5%. It seems as if the market are not ready yet to absorb that big lot of wool, and that might be with us for the unforeseen future up until the retail are ready to start selling and start getting back to normal. So for the unforeseen future, we might struggle with big volumes. With that being said, our good length wool of 65 millimeters and longer actually traded well for the day. And again, the RWS wool showed that the market are absolutely hungry for wool that has been grown in a sustainable manner. And RWS wool of 65 mil and longer actually stayed unchanged comparing to our last auction of the previous season. So they did quite well. And then the other good news is in the star sale room, both the cardings and the crutchings sold dearer if we compare it to the previous auction. So both of them were up by quite a big margin. Our buyers for the day were Standard Wool that bought the most bales, Limpriere in second place, Modiano bought the third most wool, Stukken in fourth place, TNU in fifth, Sigurd Mazarel in sixth, and New England in seventh place. And then we would also like to take the opportunity to congratulate the producers who achieved the highest prices for the day. They were Mr. Boetgreef of Somerset Oos with quite a good price of 149 rand on a 15 micron line that he sold, and Mr. JP de Villiers with 146 rand, T Barry Farming with 144 rand. And then again, Mr. Boetgreef in fourth place with 141 and 20, and then in fifth, Hanekom van der Merwe boerdery with 140 rand and 10 cents. So congratulations to our producers with the beautiful prices that were achieved on well-deserving wool. Our next auction will be on the 19th of August, and we will have approximately 9,000 bales that will be up for sale. And the market report will be done again just after the auction. So again, 6 o'clock, same place, we will do the market report again. That is all from my side. Then Gert, over to you. Then we can have a listen what happened in the livestock auctions this week.
Leon, thank you very much. Good evening to all our viewers. Yes, Leon, it's been 17 weeks, consecutive weeks that we've had our weekly digital Weaner Lamb auction. And I'd just like to give a quick reflection of what's happened in the last 17 weeks. We've traded in the region of 46,000 sheep on the platform every Monday. And on average, we have between 36 and 45 bidders locked in as active bidders. And then viewers between 130 and about 190 people logging into the auction just as viewers to see what's happening with regards to the store lamb and the fat lamb prices on Monday. Maybe just looking at the last 5 weeks, on the 13th of July, I think the store lamb price peaked at an average price of 45 Rand on average for lambs between 4 and 6 months, not shorn. For the next 2 weeks after that, it dropped slightly by about 50 cents. And then from the 3rd of August, due to new lambs coming into the market, store lambs especially, the price dropped to 41 Rand and 83 cents on the 3rd of August. And then the past Tuesday auction that we had, the average price ended up on 41 Rand and 30 cents. That was for lambs, obviously, as I stated, between 4 and 6 months old, not shorn. Looking at the fat lamb prices the last month, very high, on average about between 40 and 41 Rand 25 on the hoof. That realizes a slaughter carcass price of between 90 and I would say 95 Rand on average. So the market's still very healthy. And looking towards the store lamb price within the next 2 weeks, I would say we can expect another drop in prices because of new lambs coming into, the younger lambs coming into the market. And then on the fat lamb side, I think we're still in for another 2 weeks of relatively high prices before we will see a rise in supply of the lambs. So ladies and gentlemen, that's been 17 weeks in a row going well. And looking at the last 5 weeks, we traded 18,000 sheep. So really encourage you to get in contact with your closest or nearest BKB agent and enter into the auction. And keep on following us on Monday, every Monday at 11 o'clock. If it's a holiday on the Monday, we're looking at, we do the auctions on Tuesdays. So and again, thank you very much for the support, both for the sellers and buyers. And we're looking forward to seeing you next Monday. Now I'm going to give over to Isak. Isak, thank you very much.
Tonight we have the very big privilege of introducing Mr. Johan Stumpf, the Managing Director of BKB, to talk in our market report. Johan is our new Managing Director, but not so new anymore. And he, for some reason, chose to come into one of the most difficult times ever in the wool industry. So Johan, maybe just to begin, to introduce you, especially to our wool customers. Just give us a short background of where you come from and how you landed up at BKB.
Thank you, Isak. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, as Isak said, I've joined BKB. I think it's about 6 months now. Maybe just where do I come from and how did I get here? I don't know how far you want me to start, Isak, but I was actually born in the UK. My father studied there, but I'm fully Afrikaans, actually, although I've spent my first 2 years in the UK. Grew up in Pretoria, went to high school there at Afrikaans Hoërseens. And then I studied at the University of Pretoria. I studied industrial engineering, and I also did later on my MBA there. When I was young, just starting my career, I actually worked for SA Breweries for a while. And then at about the age of 32, I moved into the agricultural industry when I became the managing director of Sunrise River Citrus Company, which is in the Eastern Cape, not far from Port Elizabeth, in the Sunrise River Valley, Addo Kirkwood area. It was and is still the largest single citrus and fruit packer and exporter out of South Africa. Stayed there for about 8 years, and then I went to become the managing director of Klein Karoo Group, which is including the ostriches, which was settled in Klein Karoo International, then also the seed companies, and also a retail section with some shops, typically like the BKB retail environment. Very difficult times there because we had bird flu that came a little bit like the COVID, created really challenging circumstances. Stayed there until about 5 years ago, and then I joined Impact, the listed packaging company, as the managing director for the converting division. So they make paper and convert the paper into packaging. So I was on the converting side, the MD, and then late last year was approached to look at the BKB opportunity and decided that I would like to get back more closer to the agricultural sector. And then the opportunity was there, and I decided to take it. So the first 6 months quite challenging, but I'm sure we'll get through it. And I think the whole world is in a challenging period. And I think enjoying it very much and seeing quite a good future going forward for BKB.
Jan, I'm going to ask you more about this future. You've been through very, very difficult times well, have had quite a number of difficult times in your previous careers. How do you think about a time like the one that we're currently in? Is there can we give any advice to our producers? I know it's unfair to ask you wool questions at this time, although you already know quite a lot, I think. How do you change your thinking in times like this?
So I think if I can use the bird flu, I think that was a very good example of what some people will call a black swan event. It's an event that nobody really plans for, and I think COVID can really be put in the same context where it's not something that you generally plan for because it's so far out that if you plan a business for that, you will probably take very few risks. I think when these things happen, it is important for any business, not even only for an agricultural business, to at least have a strong enough balance sheet to go through times like this. So if there is any long-term planning for an event like this, I think to have a balance sheet which have a little bit of space is always very good. So generally where I went, I made sure that at least balance sheets are in such a state that should something like this happen, the business can survive, because in periods like these, it's about survival. I think secondly, then to start looking at how can we do things differently, how can we innovate around the changing external external environment. I mean, on the bird flu side, for example, our main export was actually the meat, and that disappeared overnight. So you can imagine if more than 60% of your turnover disappear overnight, it is quite a radical change in how you must look at the business. Luckily, like with BKB, the ostriches, we had some diversification, so the other businesses could go on. But we had to get the meat back up because you can't go forever without 60% of your turnover. And there, for example, we started looking at different ways to export the meat. And one of them was then to cook the meat, basically, to sterilize it, which means a cooking process. And we went through a whole process and designed actually the first process on a mass scale where we grilled steaks, froze them and then exported them. And we established that as quite a big market to counter the bird flu. Interestingly enough, when the fresh meat opened again, most of the retailers in Europe chose to stay on the pre-cooked product, and still to today they prefer the pre-cooked product because it had other benefits for them. So that was typically an example of how we innovated around a difficult situation. I think if we look at COVID, I think many businesses are in this situation. And again, I think in BKB as a company, I wouldn't say we're lucky because it was a strategy that was implemented many years ago, but we've got a whole diverse set of companies. And if I look at the COVID and the impact it had quite a big impact on the wool and the fiber division as we were closed down under lockdown level 5. And obviously, in a market like it is now, luxury products do tend to struggle a little bit more than, let's call it, mainstream food products. So during this time, our food-based businesses did fairly well. I think an irony, for example, is that if you read the press over the last 2-3 years, you would have seen that the sugar industry is in quite a difficult space. But our sugar business, that's based in Swaziland, we've had the best 3-4 months we've ever had. And we had record sales, record turnover. And that helped us to keep BKB up and running, to keep our cash resources protected, which will, in the longer term, give us some room to get the fiber back to where it should be. And I think that is BKB is one of the few businesses in agribusiness that has moved outside of its normal geographic areas, but also outside of its normal products, where it was very much focused on livestock and fiber. We've now got a grain division, a sugar division, a fruit division, and the diversification has actually helped tremendously during this period. Going forward, we will have to innovate and see how do we tackle the markets that's maybe been impacted. And there's a whole lot of different things we're looking at. But I'm pretty much sure that in a year's time, we will have BKB back up at the performance levels that it should be.
Johan, you have had lots of experience with luxury markets and ultra luxury markets. As a matter of fact, you know quite a number of the brands personally. How do these cycles work? Do these things tend to go through cycles in any case? How long do you think these cycles last? In let's forget about COVID in the normal run of things.
Yes, Isak, I think obviously the ostrich leather, which is an exotic leather, is very much in the luxury, and I mean even in the ultra luxury side of the market. And we dealt regularly with companies such as Hermes and Louis Vuitton and Kering, which is the Kering Group, which owns Gucci. They are the big players in that sector, and I think the wool and fiber is generally also can be seen in the higher end of the fashion and luxury market. What we tended to see is that with leather specifically, you've got 3 main exotic leathers, and that is ostrich, crocodile, and snake. And these three had different cycles, but they would typically take about a 3-year on cycle and let's call it a 4-year off cycle. I'm not that knowledgeable about the fiber yet, but I think in any luxury product, they tend to cycle. And I think the same will happen here. And with COVID, it might change the length of the cycle. But interestingly, when the 2009 economic crisis came, it had a huge impact on the demand for ostrich leather. So it nearly fell to 30% of what it normally was. But what was also interesting is in 2011, when the crisis was over, we actually had the highest growth we've ever had. So the cycle returned very quickly, and it returned to levels never before seen. So one can also not always say that a bad down cycle will never repair or will never stand up again. I think with luxury buyers, they tend not to be that constrained in bad economic times. And the moment they see there's now certainty of what's going to happen forward, they enter the markets again. And I'm sure it will happen this time again as well, that they, as soon as the world knows where COVID is going and what is COVID going to do in the long term, we will see the entrance of these buyers in the luxury markets again. And in my mind, in a year or two's time, we may sit here and say, yo, we've had actually a good upcycle. But the one thing I know is it will come back. It's just we don't always know how long it will take.
Johan, you've been in BKB and for 6 months now. Just in closing, anything that you would like to say to our producers going forward? It is tough times, but I agree with you. Things are going to change.
Yes, Isak. I think I see BKB and in all the agricultural companies where I was involved in, they are an important part of the chain for a producer as well. And I see it also as an extension for the producer to get his products in the market, to make sure that there is a market for the products. So I think for all producers, it is important to understand if BKB can survive something like COVID, and if they will be there to actually service the producers in the longer term. Now, the one thing that I can assure all of our producers is that when the COVID problem started, we sat down as a management team and we looked at how can we maximize the cash resources within the business. Because in times like this, you don't want to be dependent on a bank that may have its own problems with liquidity, and then just like we saw with the land bank, for example, and then just are not able to actually support you during a time like this. Now, what is good is that by implementing various different initiatives to minimize the working capital that we've got invested in the business, we have been able to actually nearly double the cash resources from the beginning of the year that is now available in the business. And we are actually in a very safe position from our balance sheet point of view, where we do not foresee any issues, even if the COVID situation lasts for another 2 years. I think BKB is quite safe. We may not grow as aggressively or even grow anything in the next year or two, but I think the focus is to keep the businesses that we've got safe and to make sure that we are there for the producer in the next year or two. And I can just assure all of them that is the case, and that at this stage there's no risks with regard to the viability of BKB going forward.
Johan, thank you so much for your time. I know that you are actually on leave, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time from your family to talk to us. All the best with your new role. All of us are looking forward to the future.
And I also want to thank all our producers for their business, and I'll look forward to speak to you again sometime in the future.
Thank Thank you, Isak and Johan. Always insightful to listen to both of you. That is then the end of our broadcast for tonight. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and listened to us. We will do the same thing next week, same time, same place. Have a good evening.